Now, this is, I think, a slide you should, all of you, remember all your life. It really is the entire story of orthotropics. This is a little boy. He came to me with quite a severe malocclusion, got an open bite and a really severe bilateral crossbite. Now, his mother asked if I could treat him, and I examined him, and yes, I could see his maxilla was quite narrow, only 34 millimeters wide. But if you look, you can also see that one of his canines has rotated. I presume the space had been lost before it tried to erupt, but it's rotated over 45 degrees, about 60, 70 degrees. Now, all of you would know that that is quite a difficult case to treat. You need to create room, and you then have to rotate the canine. And that can really be, well, take quite a while. And most people would do that with fixed appliances. Well, I suggested that that was what her son probably needed. And she said, well, I just can't afford that. I've got no money, and I'm just not able to pay for orthodontic treatment. So I said, well, if he can correct his posture and put his tongue on his palate, keep his teeth in light contact and his lips together, then it should improve. I didn't want to sound too hopeful, but I said it should improve. And I then gave a lesson, and him, I might say, a lesson in how he should try and change his posture. Well, I'm always interested in what happens. So I said to her, do please bring him back in a year's time. And she said, yes, I will. And she was stuck to her word. She brought him back just under a year later. Now, you can see his face there, and I was actually flabbergasted. His face had changed that much in a year. I think the lighting isn't quite the same, but there's no doubt whatsoever that his face has changed substantially. But what was almost more amazing was so he'd had his malocclusion. It had completely gone. His crossbite had gone with absolutely no treatment. His anterior open bite had gone with absolutely no treatment. Now, I don't think many people would believe that possible, but it had happened in under a year with absolutely no treatment. What is even more interesting is that the palate expanded by more than 2 millimeters. Now, in less than a year, that is a lot. And because it had expanded, if you look, you can see, oh dear, let me go back. You can see, if you look carefully, that the canine on the right side has rotated on its own. I find that absolutely amazing. When you consider how difficult it is to rotate a canine, that rotated on its own with no appliance, but using only the tongue and lips. The palate has widened, the teeth have straightened, his face is now good looking. Now, basically, that tells me that if we treated all our 8-year-old malocclusions by correcting their posture, every one of them would be cured. And I really believe that. It's very difficult to change posture, and not many children are able to do it. But I have no doubt that malocclusion is due purely to the misplacement of the tongue, lips, and jaws. And if they're in the right place, everybody will grow with straight teeth and also a good-looking face. And basically, that is what Orthotropics or the forward growth that Simon is achieving is done. And that's why I say this one slide should convince all of you that that is true. So remember it for all your life, because it is true and it does have an important message. Now, we need, obviously, if we're going to change faces, to measure them. Now, it's very difficult to measure a face. You can't apply a ruler or a protractor in quite the same way. But I use three basic things: the indicator line, the cheek line, and I also use the lower mandibular plane to judge the face. And I measure them with my gnathometer. I'll talk about that in a moment. But you all know the indicator line. You basically take the tip of the nose and you measure the distance to the edge of the upper incisors. It's not very accurate, but it is a quick and simple way of assessing if the maxilla is too far back. And really, the basic treatment in orthotropics is getting the upper incisors forward and then making the rest of the face grow forward to match them. But the indicator line is the key to measuring facial deformation and giving you the clues for what you should do. Now, the cheek line is slightly different. It measured basically by drawing a line from the lower eyelid down the cheek. Now, it should be more or less parallel with the nose, but most people, it's 15 or more millimeters flattened. And for many people like myself, it drops almost vertically. And you can see that's accompanied by a bump on the nose, which is the lower edge of the nasal bone. The nasal bone is quite firmly attached to the frontal bone, so that if the maxilla drops, you get a bump on the nose, and the nose actually looks much larger, but is actually smaller. Now, the mandibular plane gives me a very quick clue as to what's happened to the facial length. It should be about 7 degrees between Frankfurt plane. You know, Frankfurt plane runs roughly parallel with the tip of the nose and the tragus. But, you know, that will give you an idea of a good-looking face. Now, I wanted to measure all these things, so I created what I call my gnathometer. It fits on the forehead. Now, you may remember the research done by Bolton. He did a huge research project, over 5,000 cases. He took x-rays, and he found that the best way to superimpose x-rays was on the forehead, which he did. And he then established the Bolton norms from this, a hugely respected paper, but unfortunately, Steiner had got there before him. Steiner developed his analysis, the radiographic analysis, on the basis of, I think, mainly his son and also a few other students. And it's a very inaccurate representation, in my view, although because he was there first, it is used by almost all orthodontists. If there are orthodontists in the audience, I apologize, but I'm sure you would agree that that is the majority X-ray superimposition. Jim McNamara now has brought that forward by about 5 millimeters, and I brought it forward by 10, but we'll talk more about that in a minute.